the actors I've worked with who I would consider successful in the business are simply asking different questions than the ones who are not.
You've been on stage, in TV, in film. You started out with a very nice recurring role on a soap, which I love. And then over the years, you became head of production and you oversaw creative development for a company on multiple projects. You were an executive producer also on multiple projects. How do you like me telling everybody who you are?
It's very uncomfortable.
And then somewhere in there, you started crash acting. Your students have been nominated for Emmys, Tonys, Grammys, Ovation Awards. You are an acting coach for several huge networks, currently for Netflix. You know, I didn't know about you before the pandemic. So one of the reasons why I wanted to say all of that is that sometimes new acting teachers, for me, come on the scene and I'm like, well, who are they? You know? And over the pandemic, I was listening to your videos. I started following you and I was like, I really like what he has to say. And I thought it was very enlightening for me to actually do research on you, which is what I tell all of you actors to do. And really find out who you are and what your background is. And I'm really excited to kind of dig into your ideas today because I've been very curious about you for a long time. So should we just dive in?
Let's deep in. Let's go. Let's go.
Am I still breaking up or can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Is my picture breaking up?
No, you look great. No max headroom going here. We're great.
Okay. Okay. So my first question, because coming from the background that you came from, a lot of actors don't understand why someone would turn away from acting. You know, I did as well. I was an actor. And so through the course of your career, I was wondering if there was a particular problem or need that you saw that compelled you to become a teacher. Oh,
wow. Yeah, that's such a good question. And there absolutely is. So anytime I'm teaching teachers even, I might begin by asking a teacher, what is your assignment? And what I mean by that is, what is it that's calling you to do this? I see teaching as a vocation, as a calling. I see it as like I have an assignment that I have to fulfill. And acting wasn't fulfilling that assignment for me. I will still act. I love to act. It's the most beautiful thing in the whole world. But to me, there's something about teaching. I've been doing it I'm in my 20-something year now. And
wow.
For me, there's something about so I'll tell you what my assignment is to me. So this is the core. This is the axle that turns my wheels. And so my assignment, to me at least, is to increase the significance of anybody that I ever meet. And so I find that I'm able to do that more as a teacher than I was as an actor. But they're all connected. So in my writing, in my teaching, in my acting, in my free list, in anything, my hope is to increase the significance of anybody who interacts with me. And so I felt that that was my assignment. And I feel I execute the assignment best when I'm teaching.
I love that. That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I read about you, the way you describe your approach, you use the word guerrilla, but then I talked to you and you said it was more like a non-dominant approach. And I wanted to know why you frame it in that way.
That's such a good question. I'm so excited to talk about it. I get a little worked up, okay? Things get going through me.
I love it. I get worked up too.
I get really excited about these things. So I describe the way I approach acting as a non-dominant approach to acting that heightens the autonomy of the actor themselves and returns that autonomy to them. So the reason non-dominant is important to me is probably personal. It's probably a reflection of who I feel myself to be. But so this might be a good way to say this. So many of my acting teachers and so many acting teachers I know will suggest to say something like, do the work and then let it go. Do the work and let it go. And in a non-dominant approach to acting, I'll begin with letting it go. Let it go first.
Wow.
And let's face of letting it go. And so for me, it's a challenge because and I very much enjoy this, if I'm going to begin from the paradigm of a non-dominant approach to acting, then it's going to have to change everything that I approach. So no longer am I going to impose my objectives onto character. No longer am I going to impose my will onto the audience. I'm going to find a way that to me is more equitable in relationship to character, other, to process. And to me, it takes me deeper into the practice of acting, and not really into the training of acting, but into the practice of acting. And so it's been a wonderful challenge, and I find it to be a very beautiful approach that for me has been restorative and healing, and gosh, it releases so many things. If I'm approaching acting this way, then embedded in the approach is not only the desire to not have to get it right or not to do it this way or that way, but embedded in the approach is truly the expression of the middle, the expression of humanity, the expression of all in, the expression of inclusivity. So art then at its highest is an inclusive expression if we approach it this way. This gets very, I'm in the clouds, but
it's a little esoteric, and I sort of like, not everybody speaks in that language. So I wanted to know if you could make it a little bit more like simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, for example, this is a little weird, everybody, but I'm in Los Angeles, so forgive me. For example,
anybody who follows me knows that I'm a little weird.
Okay, very good, very good. So, for example, we develop these exercises I like to call meetings with the character, and I do this with a lot of clients if we're working on a TV show or something like this, and so instead of looking at the script and dictating what actions or behaviors or objectives and choosing them and then letting them go, I might begin by inviting the presence of the character into my presence and to actually speak with them or sit with them or even allow them to merge with me and become incarnate in my body. And in this way, it's as if the essence of the character is working with me to inspire their creation. And so that's
like how writers write. You know, a lot of writers say that the characters come to them and write through them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, it's a response to, the traditional Russian lineage, which I love so much. But I want to expand. I want to go, well, what else might there be? And I found that by dominating character through objectives, to me, I wouldn't put an objective on my wife. You see, here's your objective today, or any of my friends, here's the objective. Not that characters are not driven by action and things like this. It's I hope we can discover the action of the character in the story through a non-dominant approach that gives me more autonomy and equanimity in the relationship. That's the idea. And so it's a challenge, and it's my favorite in the world to explore.
I love that. I love that. Now, when you were at the production company, did you sit in on auditions?
Yeah, occasionally we did. It was Same Picture, run by Ivan Orlik. And it was one of the whole time I was there, 6 years, I think, it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life because I got to see all of this from a totally different point of view. Now, I was teaching as well. So I'd go to the office all day and then I would teach in the evening. So it was all blending together and helped to keep my teaching relevant in the industry.
Yeah.
But I got to see auditions and I got to evaluate, I would get all of the thumbnails and would go through everything. And sometimes they were in person. And so absolutely I did. And I would say the thing that I was drawn to the most, as a producer, I'm drawn to this person. And this is something that Yvonne and I would talk a lot about. When they came into the room or when I saw their tape, the only way I know to describe it is that the actor was in their own skin. And if the actor was in their own skin, we could pretty much do whatever we wanted to do with them. But, it's the first lesson in all the great acting books. You know thyself. And if the actor could be in their own skin, then it was a matter of, well, do they work with the director well, or do they, but if you're not present to yourself, if you're not in your own skin, there's very little that we can do after that.
Yeah, I call it a sense of ease. Actors ask me all the time, like, what's the quality of an actor that you love that stands out? Everybody wants to know how to stand out. And I'm like, it's not really about standing out. It's about sitting back.
Yeah.
It's this sense of ease, right? And all of my clients who have been successful have this sense of ease. And the best way I can describe it is they stand out by sitting back.
Yeah, that's
right?
beautiful. That's beautiful.
I love that. So besides that, were there any other golden nuggets or maybe mistakes or wins that you got from watching actors in the room as a producer?
Yeah, that's great. The actors that I saw as a producer that I felt like, oh, if I could even call it a mistake, I would never call it a mistake. But if I were to say there was something that was being done, you could taste that the experience for them was transactional.
Oh,
they were there to get the job, you know.
Oh, I just got chills.
Yeah, and you can feel that. Not that that's wrong. Like, of course that's what. But the ones that I was so drawn to were not there to get the job. They were there because it's an extension of their practice. They just loved doing it. They were, you know, and there was, again, I tell you this, in the actors I'm drawn to, they never saw the producer above them. And the producer never saw that there was an equanimity. There wasn't a pyramid, a hierarchy where they're coming in to please somebody, where the producer sits above. And I really resonate with those things. So those are the things that I like to see, that the joy in the actor's work, whether it's an audition or on stage or on set, it's contagious.
I love that. I hope all the actors here wrote that down, because I did. I love that idea of really making sure you're not approaching your auditions as transactional. It's not transactional. You can actually have an experience, an artistic experience with someone else, especially once you're in the room or if you're in a Zoom call. And I love the idea of not thinking of anyone as higher. I had someone the other day say, well, I was scared to talk to you. And I was like, what? I'm just a person, you know? And then I had one of my actors who's coming off of a series regular say, well, now do I need to approach casting directors? Like, cause now I'm unemployed. And I was like, yeah, but I really want you to approach this as a collaborative experience. You're not asking anyone for another job. You are at this level, same level as them, right?
Yeah.
I love that. And it begs the question, there are acting schools where people view the teacher as higher. And I wonder if you could speak to that. Like, was it important for you that you were on the same level as your students?
100%. And I think that's part of the non-dominant approach to acting. So crash acting began about 12 years ago. And when we began, I was very clear that I would not structure it into a hierarchical studio, which makes it a slower growth model. Let me tell you that right now. But it's been very important to me. So in every night of classes that we have, there's actors who are very established, there's actors who are beginning, and because I'm on a very individual. And so it's very important to me. I wouldn't put my name on the studio. I don't find the pyramid to be conducive of creativity. And so absolutely, it's very important to me that equanimity and that non-dominant approach to the art is reflected in all aspects of the studio. So when you walk into our studio, it's, you know, there's music playing, there's incense burning, there's coffee. And it's the vibe for sure.
So now I want to, I feel like there's two different types of actors that are here. People who have been in the business for a long time and newer actors. And so first I want to address the actors who've been in this business for 5, 10, 15 years who might be here. What is the biggest fallacy or maybe sinkhole that older, more experienced actors have about training, or something that you see consistently as a block in their path or their journey? Once maybe they've had success and then it stops, right? Can you give us any nuggets on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got in trouble in grad school 15, 20 years ago because I wrote a paper about eliminating the word training, which presents a whole lot of problems, but I wanted to replace the word training with the word practice, so that we might approach acting more like we might approach yoga or even medicine or law. And anytime a more experienced actor comes into the room, or an experienced actor who's resistant to come into the room, it's often because they feel they've been trained already, or trained, or I'm trained enough. It's past tense. And if a more experienced actor, I'm resisting saying older, if a more experienced actor can shift their mindset into one of practice, then I think it helps us to have a never-ending relationship to the whole thing. So the way that if an actor is, say, 20 years old, I am seeing that is if they have 80 years left of this.
Right.
Yeah, at least. And the perspective of practice, to me, as opposed to training, gives me the room to breathe in all of this and makes it a little less superior, inferior. So I'm not here to tell an experienced actor what to do. I'm here to deepen their practice.
Oh my God. That's like a mind-blowing nugget, really, because I think that it would help agents as well to not say to their actors, especially actors that we respect and admire, saying training, which I say a lot, kind of purports to the fact that they need something. Right. And saying no. But I do say practice. I say like a basketball player. Basketball players always practicing. You know, they call it training, but really it is a practice. And I think that that's such a beautiful way to look at it. Wow. Okay. I love that. For newer actors, what is the biggest misconception that you see when people are just coming in? Maybe it's their first year here. What do you see as the biggest misconception about the acting or the acting business?
So, that's so good. So I'm going to try to go deep on this one. I think perhaps the biggest misconception that a person who's new to the practice might believe is that acting is in some way about lying. And this gets complicated, I think, and therefore then we try to do it right. We try to do it right. We want to do it the right way. We want to do it the way it should be done, regardless of what's going on in me. And so a newer artist might even push themselves to the side to please the teacher or the agent or the director or something like this, because ultimately they want to get to a certain place. What I would say instead of a newer actor is it is the person you're bringing to the room. There's nothing more beautiful than the person who's speaking. And that's got to be a lifelong lesson for all of us. But to resist the urge to get anything right, I think, is probably a wonderful place to start. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't learn a little structure. We just don't want the structure to ever become dogmatic. We see where that's other disciplines. So to use the structure to take you to the deeper places, I think, is a really wonderful thing for a newer actor to begin to explore.
You said lying, and I thought the word that came up for me is imitating.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
What instead of, because I think somebody might say, well, I don't think I'm lying, but I find that a lot of people watch TV or they watch a film and they go, well, I could do that.
Yes.
And then it becomes this like imitation, right? So sometimes people will even send me a tape of something they saw on TV and they are imitating what they saw instead of really understanding. So there's something that you're talking about that, I think could be misinterpreted by people who are newer, because you talk a lot about just being you and that you don't need to learn anything. And I'm a little old school, right? So it kind of sticks in my craw a little bit because I then see people who think, well, I'm ready for an agent. I don't need to go to class because I'm just being me. And if I'm just being me and, Ben at Crash Acting says, you don't need anything because you've got it already, we have an issue, right? Because then I'm saying you need something and you're telling people you don't need anything. So can we talk about the nuance of that a little bit?
Yes. That's so good. I love that. Thank you for that. Of course, you're 100% correct. It is a difficult conversation. It's not a difficult conversation to have, but I find it to be almost like a social media phenomenon. The phrase "you are enough," you have everything you need already. And while that's very true, I think actually 100% of it is very true empirically. I don't think that we can have union, and so by union I mean union with myself, union with self and character. Union prior to differentiation is very difficult. And so for the actor who says, I have everything I need already, they are empirically correct. This is true. Their worth is inherent. They're beautiful from their perspective. But the process of accessing and liberating that in a truthful alignment to story, it ain't so easy. And that's what we have to practice. That's the practice. So we're beginning at the base note of what you have is good. We're starting there. And then everything else is simply to deliver and liberate that which is good in you in the telling of the story you're here to tell. And that's where the practice takes place. And so I find that probably, people say, oh, he's not a good actor. He just plays himself. I'm like, if you know how hard that is.
My husband says that. My husband says that all the time. He's like, oh, Tom Hanks, he just plays himself. I'm like, Tom Hanks is pretty rich, man. Tom Hanks.
Well, but also, there's something beautiful about art. When I see your paintings, when we read Shakespeare, when we see any great artist, we almost know who they are by the virtue of the art they've created. And so if I watch an actor and I sense, of course, I don't know who they are on one level, of course, but if I sense that they have given me a piece of themselves, I might say, well, that's just who they are. This is tremendously profound that you have given us yourself, and we see you more clearly through the fiction than I might even in reality sometimes. And so the nuance is imperative. It is never, to me, it's never advocating for apathy to say that you have all you need. It's to suggest the well is deep in you, and if you can recognize that, then you will source the drill that will help you get there.
Right, because I feel like a lot of people think it's just about the words and memorization and like you said, getting it right. Well, I can do that. And it's like, no, there's so much deeper. You do have to know yourself. Some of the most beautiful work that I saw done when I was an actor is when I see someone do a piece of acting and I can see who they are. I know who they are because I'm watching their work.
Yeah, the Mona Lisa is not about the paint.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, paint, go make a Mona Lisa. We see this all over. Anybody, we might say that many people can play the cello. What's the difference when Yo-Yo Ma does it?
Right.
There's an access there that is different. And my favorite thing to do in the world is to help myself and others discover and experience the difference.
Yes. And that special spark that each person has that they can imbue. I mean, I do love looking through Instagram and seeing artworks and knowing who the artist is. Because of the artwork. Do you know what I mean? It's like they put their stamp in it. It's so important. And you have to know yourself in order to do that. Yeah. So let me get to my next question. So you started this thing called free listening, which has now just bloomed into this big thing called Urban Confessional. And I'm curious why that started. You started it from your acting class, right? You had your students go out and do a listening thing. And I'm wondering what spurned this idea?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. I would say that, so it began 10 years ago this year. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of Urban Confessional. I would say there's nothing personally in my life that has transformed me more than this experience. And I would say there's nothing personally in my life that has transformed my understanding of acting more than this experience.
Wow.
So the truth of the real story is this. The real story is I was going through a horrible divorce, a heartbreaking divorce, and was looking to heal myself just some way. And I had discovered, and many people have, I'm sure, discovered the very healing effects of serving other people. That by serving other people, it can be restorative to the person doing the serving. And so I was looking for ways to serve in order to heal myself. But on another path, I was exploring more of the non-dominant approaches to acting. And I thought, how could we integrate service in its principle and its activity? How can we integrate service into an actor's process? So that there is a way to deepen our empathetic resonance and our understanding of ourselves and others through active service. And so I was looking for ways to do this. And, you know, these two things collided. I was crossing the street. Somebody asked me for money. I said, I don't have any money, but I will pray with you. And so that's what we did. I mean, I've never done that. It's not like something I do. And then I thought, well, it was so healing to be with somebody absent my ego, and to be in what Stanislavski would call that kind of communion, you know, between two people. Just, it was beautiful. And I thought, what's the closest thing to free prayer that I could do? And I thought, well, listening is probably the closest thing. So I went up to the class I was teaching that night, and I said, listen, it's compulsory. I'm not making anyone do this, but I'm going to do this. And if anybody would like to join, we'll be at the metro station in North Hollywood holding a sign that says free listening. And now it's in 80 countries around the world. People just free listening, more than actors, of course. But it changed my understanding of presence. It changed my understanding of listening. It changed my understanding of empathy. It just flipped the whole thing on its head for me.
And so I'm eager to hear the actors that did do this with you. Did you see the work change? And if so, in what way?
The difference is radical. It's a radical difference. If you can go and you can hold a sign that says free listening, and you can be present to anyone who comes, you can be present in your body, present in your active listening, just present all around. And you practice that presence on the streets with a stranger, then that level of presence almost becomes a default in the presence of another actor or an agent or anything. And so what we were talking about earlier, you and I, it brought the actor into their own skin more. And it to me, it's the gem of life, I guess, if what the practice is presence and deep listening. And so what I would see is that actors who would regularly do it would then come and they do a scene in class or something, and there was just a different quality about their essence and being. They were listening and therefore then responding differently, and the whole thing shifted. And I know it's a palpable difference. Yeah.
You know, I have to say, in a lot of the self-tapes that I see and have seen over the years, this is a big deal, and it's with actors who have been in the business for a long time and newer actors. And I find that the actors who have been in it for a long time, sometimes they get a scene or they're sort of on autopilot, right? We say that about sometimes people on TV series too. They're just on autopilot, right? Yeah. They've sort of given up this presence, something that deepens the work. And when I see people who have already decided what the scene is supposed to be like, it's very loud on the tape, even though the actor doesn't think that they weren't present. I can tell that they had an idea of the scene, and that's what they're trying to get across. And the people who move me, the people ask me all the time, actors ask me all the time, what in a self-tape stands out? And this is it, this presence, this ease, this like being very present. And I love this listening. My question for you, because I was trained by Sanford, Sanford Meisner, for anybody who doesn't know who that is. How is your listening similar or different to the listening that Sanford taught me?
Well, so I taught some of Meisner's work, and I'm very familiar with what he does. So I don't necessarily know what you would have experienced there, but what I will say that going on and holding a sign, there's something very dangerous about it.
Yeah.
And when I say danger, I don't mean violent. I mean danger as in it's a palpable risk that the actor and the person doing it is making themselves available in a way that they really cannot control. And so we come face to face with our judgment about other people. We come face to face with our fears about being approached and listening. And so what I found is I love what Meisner does. It's so beautiful and heightens an actor's awareness of themselves and the other in a very powerful way. And so let's take that same type of experience out into the jungle of the streets and find out, you know, what happens. So in a way, it might be a similar discipline in a very different environment. And so it brings a slightly different experience. And then also, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, the listening exercises and the listening that Meisner would have spoken about was not necessarily an act of service to the world.
No, at all.
Yeah. And so the listening that happens on the street is in no way transactional. It is an act of service at its core. And by committing to the act of service, the actor deepens their listening. Because now it's not about me at all. It's simply about my serving you. And therefore then I shift, and so does the other.
I just like, this is sort of, I don't know why it's hitting me in a very specific way, but the idea that you could bring that level of understanding into every single audition is so beautiful. It just adds this other level of, you know, some actors might be like, oh, well, this is only 10 lines. Like, why do I want to go in? But if you're approaching it from this other level, I'm always like, this is your chance to connect.
Yeah.
Your chance to connect with a new person who doesn't know your work yet. Can you look at it like that? And this, what you're saying, is bringing it even deeper, which is, you know, can you be of service when you go in? And it's not like, oh, I'm going to show them how this is done. I'm going to, you know, all casting directors want the actor to get the job. They want you to be their savior, right? They want an actor to come in and go, well, there it is. We're done, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, in a sense, is an act of service, right? But if it's so much deeper than that, if you can go in and really listen. I love this. I love it.
We're, you know, in service to, sometimes we forget the power of story. And story, I believe, story is a much more powerful communication tool, of course, than data. Every good marketer knows this. Advertising agency knows this.
Yeah.
And what the power of story can do, you know, you can see a film like Forrest Gump or like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or something, and these films can shift consciousness.
Yeah.
They can quite literally change the way people relate to each other. And the actor going into an audition is in service to the whole process. And at the very heart of what they do, they're in service to the story that may change the consciousness of the world for the better. And I don't believe that is overstepping. I do believe that is at the core of what we're trying to do as artists. And to keep that in mind, even at the, you know, the sometimes inconvenient process of auditioning, that you are still in service to something that could quite literally shift the world that so desperately needs it, by the way.
Is there ever a time when someone comes to you and they've been in the business for quite a while, and you can tell that they've got a chip on their shoulder, or they're negative about the business in a way that they feel like it has failed them, or that they're owed something? What do you say to those actors? Do you ever tell people to take a break, or how do you switch them out of that mindset?
Yeah, what a wonderful question. Yeah, all the time. It happened just the other day, actually. The first thing I want to do is acknowledge just how difficult this can be to do this. It's very difficult to bear the weight of your dreams. And I think many people just don't have dreams, or have let them go because it's easier not to bear the weight of those dreams.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can become fatigued under the weight of our dreams. And so we have to acknowledge that this is real and this is actual. And so then other than encourage, we can take a look at our relationship to the business. And I think, let's flip it this way. Let's see. Most of the really beautiful actors I know consider they are too small for the business. And I'm just using that word as a metaphor, that there's no place for them there, that nobody sees them, nobody notices them, and so they do not feel seen by the industry. And when we don't feel seen, of course, we don't feel known. And when we don't feel known, we don't feel loved.
Yeah.
And so that in this industry, we are not loved. When actually what I see, and I genuinely believe this, it's in some way it's very true. Most of the actors I know have too much to give to the industry. In other words, the industry is looking for this one, for example, this role for this thing, and the actor might berate themselves for not fitting into this very small thing, when actually the actor is bringing so much. The actor actually is too large for the industry. They have the capacity to create everything. The actor is the creator, you see. So we artists have the unique ability to create a future that others are incapable of seeing. This is larger. The industry is beautiful and I love it, and it allows us to do things at a certain level, but it's a very small part of this thing, and that is not to try to convince somebody they shouldn't go the traditional path of the industry, or that they shouldn't get paid or make it is to remind the artist that it is in their authority to create a future not been created, and not to advocate that authority to a very small perspective of one way of doing this. I see acting in many ways, but one of them is as an ancient tradition that goes back hundreds of thousands of years. And to reduce this tradition to just a co-star or just, whatever, that's a chip we let go of. So the question is, if we can come to see this as a tradition, and by virtue of you being an actor, you are going to extend the tradition, the question, what are you going to add? And how are you going to advance the tradition? This, to me, puts it in a perspective where I don't put all of my cards in one very small target that I need to hit. That's where
So what are the questions that you would say to someone who was like, who is in this position where they're just like frustrated and they just don't feel seen, like you said? Do you ask them questions? They're like, oh, I just think I should quit. Do you do you ask them questions? What do you do? What do you say?
First thing I want to do is see them. I want to see them, and I want to give them the opportunity to be seen in the ways that I can do that, even in the classroom. And of course, it's not always the way they'd like to be seen, but it's a good beginning. It's a pretty good start. And the second thing is, I'd like to direct them to the sincerity in their heart, the sincerity with which they want to do this work. And sometimes we forget about that. And I find that in the arts, a little sincerity goes a long way. And if you're frustrated, it tells me that you have a great deal of sincerity. I want to get out there. This is a very good thing. And so then I want to stoke that flame. I want to see, do they realize that at some point they were bit by the acting bug at 5 years old or at 10 years old or whatever it was, and they will spend the rest of their lives learning to be faithful to this thing that bit them. And so they're going to spend the rest of their lives trying to do this. And so the questions that I would ask would be, do you still have a sense of that amateur in your heart? Do you still have a sense of the high school actor who just can't believe it? Or have you lost that flame entirely? Because if you surrender the passion of the amateur for the purpose of the professional, it's bound to be a difficult path. But if you can reignite the passion of the amateur into the world of the professional, you can change everything, and it's wonderful. So those are the kind of questions I would ask them to redirect themselves to. Why did you begin doing this in the beginning? And let's return to that. Okay,
so I told you the quality that my actors who work and are successful have, this sense of ease. I'm curious if you have seen something different, because it happens all the time, right? It can happen at the beginning of somebody's career. Somebody can audition one time and get on a show, and some other people are a slow burn. Do you see a specific quality or something in common with all the people that you've worked with that are successful in the business? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily good or bad actors. I mean, successful in the business.
Absolutely. This is crazy. For me, the actors I've worked with who I would consider successful in the business are simply asking different questions than the ones who are not.
Oh, that's so good. What are the questions?
Well, the ones that I know that are most successful are asking questions, not just about how do I get the job, but how do I live an artistic life? They're asking questions. Of course, they're asking the top level questions, the transactional strategy goals. Of course. But they wake up every day and they're going, who am I? What truth can I tell today? And so that acting is not reserved for the audition. The acting is not reserved for the job. This is going to sound quacky, but the way they treat people is the same way they treat their work, is the same way they treat animals or plants or the world, you see. And so there's a cohesiveness in what they're doing. And so in my experience, the actors who are working the most are, in a weird way, least focused on the work. On the working, not on the work, but on the working. They see their acting as part of an ecosystem of creating something larger with their life, creating a body of work that will outlast their physical body. And so it happens quite as an extension of who they are, and not because their ambition was driving them to get something they think they want to fulfill them. So in other words, maybe the actors I know who are successful were fulfilled prior to their success.
Exactly. And I feel like it's one of the things I try to express, but you're doing it so beautifully here, is that everything you just expressed, when someone is truly embodying all of that, people feel that as an energy.
Yeah.
So when you walk into a room or when you see them on the tape, you know, I tell people all the time, I know you think you're hiding it, but you can't hide your energy.
No, 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 no.
You can't hide your fulfillment or your dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so, so, so important. I love that you talked about that. So a lot of the new people, the first thing they want to do is they want to get an agent. So I'm sure they come to you and they're like, well, how do I get an agent?
Yeah.
I have what I say, but what do you say to those people?
I say, I love your enthusiasm. I love your enthusiasm. So that's so good. Yes. And whenever I go on Instagram Live, I'll get a little kitschy sometimes. I said, stop asking me how to be famous and start asking me how to be great. This is the difference here.
Yeah.
One of the analogies that I like to use is, you know, of a chef, maybe, that the majority, I know a few chefs. I'm not a chef, so if I'm misspeaking, I apologize, but I know a few chefs. And it seems that the majority of their work is in sourcing beautiful ingredients and then learning what to do with them.
Ooh.
And so they'll go, I mean, I know a couple people who will go to Wisconsin to find the cheese. You know, they'll go everywhere to find the best ingredients, and then they dedicate themselves to learning what to do with those ingredients. And then on the night, they plate the dish. And the plating of the dish is very important. It's, you know, it's very important. But if a well-plated dish is serving poor ingredients, we're never going back to the restaurant. And so when an actor says, how do I get an agent? How do I, you know, this kind of stuff? I said, well, listen, you're more focused on the plating of the dish than you are the ingredients. I'm here for ingredients. And I find that you can have wonderful ingredients. And if it's not plated perfectly, we're still going to give you another shot. Okay, we're going to work on the plating, but the sourcing of the ingredients and learning what to do with the ingredients you source, that's the discipline. That's the practice.
Ah, amen. I love that. I love that. Yeah. I think it's I've never heard that analogy before. I love that. Do you have a question for me?
Oh my gosh. So many. Okay, here's what I want to know. Okay, I didn't know who you were before the pandemic. And then I noticed, who is this agent who is so beautifully generous with everything? Who is this agent who has suddenly become so human in this work? You know, because actors are just agents. We see agents as like, you know, lawyers who yell at us and do contracts and things. And I started watching what you were doing, Stacey, and it is, to me, so inspiring what you do, because you are so giving of your time and wisdom and advice. You hold a beautiful tension between being holding integrity in your opinions without needing to be right about things. You have so much breathing room around you. Even when somebody books a job and you do a celebration for them, how beautiful is this? So my question to you is, what are you doing? What is driving you? What is your assignment? What's your assignment?
Well, I got sick, you know.
Yeah.
4 years ago, I got stage 3C ovarian cancer, and it sort of started there. But I mean, I've been an agent. I started as a manager, and then I was an agent, and I really felt like, oh, I have something to share. I have learned something, and I truly believe that, and I think it started all the way back then. When you learn something as a human and you have an experience, I believe it is our assignment, like you say, to shine the light back for people. I had people help me when I started my company. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to help people. And then when I got sick, and I'm well now, thank you, I was like, I'm going to be very vocal, and tell people everything, because I think you need to shine the light back. And if I can inspire or help someone without them having to go through my experience, I'm going to do it. Yeah. And I think that that has just really fueled the rest of my life, which is, how can I give back some of this knowledge to help others on their path? And that is what fuels me. Some people might not think that I'm, you know, you said such nice things about me, but, you know, it's a fine line between keeping a boundary, right? So then people like, oh, Stacey's so open, and then they end up calling me on the phone, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You know?
Beth. Calling you Beth, even, I heard.
Yeah, which is a common mistake, and my middle name is Beth, so that's fine. But like, I just think that, you know, there is this balance, but I do recognize it in you. I think during the pandemic, because we were shut away, then it becomes, okay, how do we shine our light now? Yeah. And we started trying to give as much advice as we could. And so my assignment is, you know, I'm now on the next 50 years, right? And I think that I think we're really lucky to be alive and be able to breathe. So yeah. I want to help other people breathe easier in some way.
Oh. Wow. Well, I experience you as a shepherd in our community, and I think it's unbelievable, because you know, if we're all being very honest, I think the relationship between actor and agent is misunderstood. And I think a lot of agents that I know are in it for the money and, you know, for things. And you seem to be a purpose-driven agent and an advocate for actors. And it's something that's so desperately needed on this side of the community. And I'm so grateful for your presence, really.
Well, genuinely. Don't get me wrong. I love money.
Well, of course, we all do. Yes, we need it. We need it. It's very important, of course. But it doesn't seem to be the thing you lead with, at least in what I've come to know you about.
No, because I do think I am about the connection too. I think that's why your work speaks to me. And so I guess one of the things I'd like to talk about now with you is, when you are wanting to inspire the actors, like if all the people here, what would you say to them to inspire them in the business, in their acting, in whatever, if they think they're not far along in the path, or they're judging themselves against other people, or I'm never, like, what kind of nuggets of wisdom can you give us that would be inspiring for them today?
Wow. Okay, that's wonderful. So I think what inspires me the most, so I'll say what might inspire me, and I hope it might inspire others, but what inspires me the most is that I look around at the world that is clearly, for many reasons, I think the world is clearly in desperate need of some kind of healing, some kind of something. And the way that makes sense to me is that each of us, each actor, really, truly, that each actor is in and of themselves an original artist. They're not just a conduit for the playwright. You're not just a conduit or a robot for the director. That you are, in fact, an original artist. And by virtue of that originality, you have something to say that we need to hear, genuinely. And though you may say it through the words of a fiction, it's the voice that says it that endows the fiction with its meaning. Because the fiction, the writing, is two-dimensional until it becomes incarnate in the actor's body. And in your body, you have a medicine we need. Clearly, and my belief, I cannot prove this, but my belief is that if each of us were to give that which we have been uniquely given ourselves to the world, that maybe the pieces, like a piece of puzzle pieces, would come together, and we might find that there is something that we can do together. And so I think it's very important for everybody who might be listening, who is an actor, to remember that what you have to give is something we don't. It is not just about booking the small TV role. There's nothing insignificant in the work you're doing. It is significant work. It is needed work, and it's the extension of an ancient tradition. And we need what it is you have to say in this work. That I think is very true and important. So I hope that's inspiring to somebody.
I find it inspiring. I liken it to my art, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I put the weight of making money on my art, it is sort of the death of art, right?
Yeah. Yes, it's wonderful. Yeah.
It's I believe that you enter into this what did you call it, this legacy of, you know, acting that's been going on for centuries. You enter it because it's sacred. You enter it because you have something to express and say and give, and to then reduce it to the money and the business, which is very narrow, right? My teacher, one of my teachers, I've studied with many teachers, and one of them, Jeffrey Tambor, used to say, open the aperture.
Yes, yes, yes. Open your aperture for sure.
You're too small right now. And I truly believe that when you take a class like yours and you expand what you're trying to say and do in this business into more of a world view or a personal assignment, that things are drawn to you. You know, naturally. So I sold a piece yesterday, and I didn't do that because I was trying to sell or I was trying to make my art pay my rent. Yeah. But I sold it because someone recognized the humanity or what I was trying to do. And I suppose that you probably deal with this a lot. And it is a fine line to walk. It's like, well, people say, well, I have to feed my kids.
Of course, yes.
And I have to pay for acting classes.
Of course, yeah.
And I have to, you know, put gas in my car. I mean, somebody just said, yes, but this economy has many people worried about survival. So how do you navigate someone who really wants to do acting as a business, right? But what we're trying to say is you must do it for the love of the art. Yeah. And if someone is actually saying, I need acting to pay my rent, what do you say to someone like that?
Well, I want to honor the necessity of financial stability.
Yeah.
Very important that someone feels stable in their finances and they meet their needs in their finances. If they cannot meet their needs in finance, you can be in survival mode. It can be difficult to be creative in survival mode. And so there's one level of this that's very practical. That is, you know, let's make sure that you are stable, but you also must be emotionally stable and relationally stable. There's lots of forms of stability, and financial stability is one of them. But I love what you said. If I look to acting to meet my needs, I'm not in an act of service to that which is larger than me.
Oh!
You see, and so if I treat acting that way, how do you think it will treat you? You know, kind of a thing. I'm objectifying the medium, in other words. And so if the actor, and I would always encourage this. In fact, I've over the years, I've had two actors be like, well, I'm living in my car. I said, well, then you cannot study with me because I'm not interested in that experience. I'm very interested in an actor feeling stable enough to pursue the things they'd like to pursue. And so sometimes that means, of course, day jobs and all the things we have to do. But to see acting as a point of transaction is to see the sunset as a point of transaction. And so I want the sunset to make me money. I want the sunset to, you know, and I find that the sunset doesn't serve you if that's how you treat it. And so I would say what you're saying is 100% correct, that in the moment of creation, in the creation of your paintings and your art, which is stunning, by the way, I could ask you a lot of questions about that. But in the moment of great creation, there is no ego present. I don't know that ego can make anything great. Now, we might be egotistical afterwards, you know, or whatever. But in the offering of the self onto the canvas, or the offering of the self into the medium, there's no ego present there. And when we do it for that reason, I find that the rewards follow. But when we do it for the reward, it does not. And you know, that's a tough thing to say, especially if you're somebody who's suffering financially. It's a tough thing to hear. And so I would always advocate for someone to become more financially stable so that they feel they can pursue the things without drowning, you know?
Yeah.
And then also, I'll say one more thing. If you have to give up the pursuit of acting for a bit because you have to focus on raising a family and providing for that family, I can think of no greater artistic endeavor than that. And I would like to let everybody know that my belief is if that's a decision you've made and for 5 years, maybe you've had to nurture your family or take care of yourself or whatever, that if and when you do return to acting, that I have found that in the 5 years you dedicated your life to raising your family, you learned more about acting than 5 years at Juilliard would have taught you.
Yeah.
You know, and so I just find that if we extend what it means to be an actor, and so I'm not an actor in the industry, I'm an artist in the world. And therefore then acting is for all of it, you know.
I'm not an actor in the industry, I'm an artist in the world. How beautiful is that? Somebody write that down. Okay. Yeah. What I still have questions, but like, what do you say to someone who's in class and who sees their classmate get a job and they're like, what about me?
Yeah.
What do you say to that person? Do you have people say that?
You know, I'm sure I wouldn't hear that in our studio much. We begin every day with announcements. I find that the artists who can't genuinely celebrate another artist, they're approaching the work transactionally instead of transformationally. And so when we have a transactional perspective on the work, we tend to see opportunity like a piece of the pie, you know, and the more someone else gets, the less I get kind of thing. And I could go back to the sunset, I guess. That's a good example. If we saw the sunset the same way we see opportunity in acting, then I would get jealous if you saw the sunset and you know, the more of it you saw, the less of it I'm going to see. But this is not how it works. You know, in fact, when we see the sunset, I'm like, Stacy, come with me to see the sunset because it's more beautiful even when more people see it because we're sharing this thing. And I genuinely believe that this work as actors must be more transformational than transactional. So we must approach our work like the sunset. And if Stacy books a job and I do not, it is not one less job for me, but by virtue of celebrating you, I revel in your opportunities as well. And when we can get to that place, we just see so much more clearly that way, and we stay so much more focused on the things that matter. But jealousy and comparison are seductive. I think the greatest temptation for any actor is the temptation to self-doubt. And so I'll look any way I can look for it. But we must find different ways of approaching everything if we're going to nip that in the bud.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I could talk to you about acting for days, but if there was one thing you wanted to leave everybody with, what would you say?
Oh my goodness. There's one thing that I wanted to leave everybody with. Oh my goodness. Well, I think I would say this, that what you're doing in the pursuit of being an actor is a worthwhile life. It is worth the dedication of your life to do this. And that some people listening, they may hear echoes of it somewhere, you know, and I would encourage you to go listen to those echoes and rejoin the fold, that it's one of the most beautiful ways to live your life, because being an actor, to me, it means learning to live more fully. And what greater thing is that than to do what you're doing as an actor?
Oh, just beautiful. I'm so grateful that you took this time to talk to me, and
having me. This is wonderful.
I just think you're really cool. And I didn't get to ask you like a couple of questions, like what you thought, how you feel like your classes are different than others, but I don't think we needed to, because I feel like you just stated everything so beautifully, and I'm so grateful for this time, and thank you. I think you're a really cool human.
Thank you. I feel the same way, and I hope to see you in person soon.
I hope so too. Let's make that happen.
I would really. Yeah.
I'm gonna save this so everyone can watch it. I'll put it on my thing, and thank you. It was really wonderful getting to know you.
Thank you. It was so wonderful to be with you. Thank you.
And thanks everybody who came.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.